Well, welcome back to another discussion on emergency management. We're going to be talking for the next few minutes about how to build sort of the best and most effective emergency management sort of organization you can. And this is everything from, your local, you're working for a local county or a municipality, all the way up to or all the way over to a nonprofit, or even if you're in charge of like a government office or something like that, a larger government office. What's that look like? What's an effective sort of operation look like? And so right now, and we discussed it in class last week, was basically that local level. And so we're going to stay right there today. And then down the road at some point we'll discuss some of the additional levels. But what's an effective local emergency management function look like? So the first sort of things to sort of get us thinking is what's a good leader look like? If you were to sort of put your finger on a good leader in your life, what's that person look like? What traits does that person have? That will begin to sort of build the skeleton out of what we want an effective, sort of an efficient emergency management function to look like, right? Because we want to emulate and sort of mimic those traits, right? Because of the way that it's set up and that sort of quasi-military setup, good leadership is vital. So that's sort of the first thing. You have to ask yourself, what leadership traits do you sort of look up to? And are you able to, sort of internally, are you able to make those sort of come alive in your life as well? And then secondly, so we're looking at it from sort of the top down, what's good traits of a leader. But then you think about it like, what makes a good team? Because the people that you pull around you, that group of individuals, oftentimes will mean whether or not will create a situation where you are either successful or you fail. And so that's the next thing. So what's a good team member look like, and what traits does the team member contribute to the group as a whole? So the leadership traits that you find sort of admirable, those are the ones you need to project. And sort of the traits of the team, those are the ones that you want to surround yourself with, and to a degree you want to project those as well. So thinking about local emergency management, if we're thinking about it from a governmental standpoint, most places now they're going to be called, at the county level, specifically, they're going to be called, the Office of Emergency Management, or the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. There are still some locations that refer to it as the Office of Civil Defense. Whatever it's called, it sort of fills the same needs, or fulfills the same needs. It may be something that's separate from, it may be its own office, it may be something that's under another office, right? So you might find yourself where you're in maybe the sheriff's department, or you're in in the case of a private or a nonprofit, you might find yourself, in a development piece, or a development office or something, and then you're here somewhere, but you're operating within this function here. Wherever you find yourself, again, you're going to be doing the same types of things, but you're sort of your location within the organization is going to be a little bit different. It's also important to note here that we're relatively young, right? The emergency management profession, while it's been around in some form for a long time, as a sort of a recognized field of study, it's relatively young. I've heard numbers that prior to 9/11, which is a real hinge point for the field, there were only 4 schools offering emergency management degrees. Currently, there are, I believe, around 385 or 386. And so that's quite a large jump in just 17 years. But as more and more people look at this as a field of study, and more people look to get into it, it's going to continue to boost the profession. But it's important to understand that the majority of local emergency management offices, even currently, are going to be one person. In some cases, they're going to be, half-time, where your responsibility is, 911 in addition to your emergency management function. There are also going to be cases where, there's several places here in Ohio, at least one that I'm familiar with, where there is one individual local emergency manager who's responsible for more than one county. And so these 2 counties have gotten together and said, our population's low, our risks is low for some of this stuff, and so we're going to sort of share an emergency manager. But it's important to realize that you're probably not going to find yourself in a department with 15, 20 people where unless you're from one of the big counties or a big municipality, you're going to be doing this to a large degree on your own. As I mentioned, the size of the community, the amount of resources, I think also sort of a comprehension that this is a real need. That's another thing that I've sort of observed. Many regions around the world, really specifically in Ohio, for instance. So let's just go a little smaller. In Ohio, some places you're going to find that the administration, that sort of upper level administration, they recognize that this is a needed sort of function within the local government. Other places they're going to see it as sort of just extra, right? We did this for a long time without somebody specifically for it. And so you're going to have to sort of prove yourself to some degree. Unfortunately, you'll be trying to prove yourself oftentimes to sort of those people who are going to be the ones signing your check. So that sort of gets a little foggy sometimes. Who are you going to be working with, right? If you're at the local level, you're going to be working with police, fire, EMS, your local NGOs, right? Your Red Crosses, your Salvation Armies, your churches. Again, the beauty of sort of local emergency management is that you can build relationships, right? And so you can pick up the phone and call the local Catholic church, up the road, and set up a time to have coffee and discuss, what their plan looks like and what they sort of bring to the table in case of a large-scale emergency. A couple other things. Funding. Who's paying, right? How do we get money for this local emergency management? The most obvious source of funding is going to be your local administration, right? The people who sign your checks, those are the people who are allotting money within your budget. That's going to be the first sort of stop on this trip to funding. There are also, in many cases, there are FEMA grants that can be applied for. Sometimes if you experience a large event, the FEMA, if it's a declared event, there might be reimbursement funds available through the state EMA or through FEMA. And then there's also grants. In addition to the FEMA grants, there are organizations that want to sort of prepare for and respond and sort of beef up their ability to respond. The Ohio Christian University, a private funder bought a response vehicle for the university. The reason that they did that was because they wanted to sort of beef up the ability for the church, or in the case of Ohio Christian University, they've partnered with many other sort of nonprofit organizations, and so that private grant money, that private funding came in, and it's really augmenting the response capabilities even of our sort of the county and the region here. Effectiveness, right? So you're going to have a local emergency management function in place. How can it be more effective, right? What you do not want to do is you don't want to staff it or put people in place who are fillers. That's been done a lot less and less. But as the profession has grown and people have come out and they have degrees in emergency management, those are the people who are filling the jobs. Whereas before, the local fire department, the chief retires, he takes over as the emergency manager. Not to say that he or she is not effective, but they don't have necessarily specialized training. So how are you more effective? One of the first pieces is to surround yourself with people who have experience doing it. That is not just sort of at the local level with your volunteers and with staff. Again, you're probably just going to be a one-person office, but there are probably other staff. Reach out to your fire department, reach out to your police department, reach out to EMS and the local whatever. You're going to find people that can help you plan, prepare for, and ultimately respond to disasters and emergencies. When you have that downtime, when there's not something going on or you're not putting a plan together, go out, meet people, have coffee, talk with people, build those relationships, build that network of people. So when it comes time, you're able to pick up the phone and start calling people and getting resources and assets and that sort of stuff into the event, right? Have a plan. Putting your the most emergency operation plans. If there's not been some event, I'd venture to say that most of them are just collecting dust on a bookshelf somewhere. Have a written plan, but in addition to having the written plan, use it. Get people familiar with it. Test it. Drill it. Exercise it. That's a whole other piece, but one of the things we do to sort of prepare for the inevitable events that we're going to encounter is we exercise. And so if that plan that you have is just sitting on a shelf somewhere, it's of no use, right? You have to get it out and sort of operationalize it, get people familiar with it. So when the time comes and you pull it off the shelf, people aren't scratching their head wondering, what is this thing? I've never seen it before. The experience you have, even with smaller things, oftentimes can inform your ability to respond to the larger things, right? We operate, or we try to operate in an all hazards response sort of way. So the large chunk of the way that we would respond to something very small looks similar to the way we'd respond to something very large, right? There's going to be sort of specifics that are going to be different, right? The size is going to be different. But what we do for a small event is also what we do for a large event. So taking that experience that you have with the small stuff, right? The car crash or the tanker that overturns on your highway can help you with, a 9/11 type event or a Katrina, something very large. Be familiar with the policies and procedures, not just locally, but at a state level, and sort of your neighbors, the local counties, the other local nonprofits. Find out what they're doing, and either sort of confirm that your policies are in line with sort of what's happening, or decide that, hey, we have a gap here, we need to change something, and be sort of proactive in front of the event, a crisis or the emergency. You're making sort of those plans to fix the gaps before that. And then finally, don't just surround yourself with sort of the experts in emergency management, but I would also encourage you to sort of surround yourself with, the local commissioners, right? The local mayor, other elected officials, representatives from other groups. The LEPC model is very good at that. Bringing a lot of sort of the decision makers. Not only will this sort of get their input, but it also can get buy-in, right? And so when you're having trouble explaining why that your position is required and why it's important that you exist, all of a sudden when that person has been sitting at these tables and person after person after person has come to you with some need and you were able to sort of respond based on your expertise, how valuable is that when you go to that person and when it's time for a pay raise, or it's time for you to ask for an additional additional person in your office, or an additional resource or a piece of equipment. It's super valuable. So that's local emergency management. That's a very sort of 30,000 foot look at it, but that's that's all I want. I want you to just sort of wet your whistle a little bit with this material, and begin getting you to get you to begin thinking about what this looks like. How am I going to plug myself into what's happening on a local level? So, thank you very much.